Onto your headphones and pour your favorite beverage. It's time for the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, fresh off the sidelines, your host, Matt McPeak.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what is up? Welcome to the Week 10 edition of the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for joining me tonight. We got 4 teams on bye, which we have for the past couple weeks now. I think there's 2 more weeks of byes, and then we're all done with that. But it's Jets, Chiefs, Cowboys, Falcons. Decent number of fantasy-relevant players for sure. So let's get into it. We got the Eagles at the Giants. For Philly, we're starting Miles Sanders. He's apparently on track to play. We're starting Travis Fulgham because he's become their guy there. The rookie Jalen Reagor, if he's healthy, I'm playing him. And then you got Dallas Goedert. He played last week, coming back off the injury, and I'm pretty sure he's all set, ready to go for this one. So you're going to want to play him as well. And then for the Giants, it's Darius Slayton, and I think Evan Ingram is back into the I mean, you can't really say any tight end is really must start besides, to me, it's really just Travis Kelce and maybe Darren Waller. But besides them, there's just a whole bunch of dudes that are pretty much in the same spot where it's, touchdown or bust, or hope that they get, 60 to 70 yards. But I think Evan Ingram is back into that spot now, and it's a good matchup for him again. But like I said, for the past couple weeks, he's had good matchups every week, and yet he's still been inconsistent. You got Dwayne Gallman has averaged 12 carries a game over the last 3 games. He scored in all 3 games. Did have 5 catches in Week 7 against Philadelphia, but the Eagles' run D is actually pretty good. They've allowed the 10th fewest fantasy points per game to running backs. So if Devontae Freeman suits up for this game, I think Gallman is somebody you can avoid. But if Freeman is out again, then maybe Gallman's just a play by default because the running back position is so beat up this year. Then you got Sterling Shepard. He missed a couple of games earlier this year, but he's got 3 straight games with at least 6 targets now. 4 of his 5 games with 6 catches this year. He's only had 1 touchdown, but and that was against the Eagles in Week 7. So I think this game will be a lot like that Week 7 game. Sterling is not the worst bye week replacement for any of these wide receivers that you might have on bye this week. So I think he can be flexed in a PPR league, but in a non-PPR league, I might try and avoid him. Jaguars at the Packers obviously starts for James Robinson, DJ Shark, Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams. I think Marquez Valdez-Scantling is a good start after his big game last week. The Jags have allowed a lot of big plays to wide receivers this year. And then the Packer tight ends, only the Falcons have allowed more touchdowns to tight ends than the Jaguars this year. But which Packer tight end do we start? Mercedes Lewis scored last week. Tanyan has had 3 times the targets, and he scored 5 times this year. Now, 3 of his 5 touchdowns came in 1 game, but and he hasn't scored since then. And that was in Week 4. Tanyan has 4 red zone targets. Mercedes Lewis only has 3. I have Tanyan in one of my dynasty leagues, but I think I'm going to go with the hot hand and say that the Packers tight end that's going to score in this Jaguars matchup, because it seems like it does every week, it's going to be Mercedes Lewis again. I think Tanyan is more of their stretch the field, quote-unquote, tight end. He's more of a deep threat to me than he is a red zone threat. Plus, Mercedes Lewis will be playing with just a little bit of revenge on his mind. Yeah, he played a couple years down there in Jacksonville, and then they let him go. The rookie Laviska Shenault, unfortunately, I think with the quarterback change, Shenault is going to see a lot less targets. Jake Luton wants to throw the ball downfield. He's really not interested in dumping it off or hitting those shifty little slot receivers. DJ Shark was 5th among wide receivers last week in air yards, while Chenault had just 1 target. So the ball is clearly going to be going to DJ Shark in the air and not to Chenault on these little screens and all this other little stuff that they like to use him for. Let's see here. So that's going to do it for that game. We got the Washington football team at the Lions. Second straight
revenge.
Yeah, second straight game of revenge for Adrian Peterson. Kenny Golladay is not looking good. He hasn't practiced all week. It's Thursday night, and I'm pretty sure he didn't practice today either. Terry McLaurin and Antonio Gibson are really the only guys I'm willing to start for Washington. For the Lions, though, TJ Hawkinson is a good start, as good as any tight end this week. Maybe you can consider him a must-start. Washington has allowed the 6th most fantasy points to tight ends, 6 touchdowns already this year. Hawkinson scored at least, he scored last week, and he's had at least 8 targets in his last 2 games. I think Hawkinson will be making my my tight end touchdown scorer ticket. Hell, he might even make the 3 touchdown scorer parlay ticket for the podcast picks. I don't know. You might have to tune in. Stay tuned for that one. Marvin Jones, 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. If Kenny Golladay is out, which it looks like he will be, you're going to want to start Marvin Jones again. DeAndre Swift seems to have taken the lead role. He had 13 carries and 5 targets last week, finished with just under 100 total yards. Washington has an average run defense, but they've allowed the fewest receiving yards to running back. So I think you can start Swift, but don't expect a big game. Peterson is still going to get his share of the touches. So I would only start DeAndre Swift if you absolutely need to. Texans at the Browns. We got another
revenge.
Yeah, another revenge game for Duke Johnson here. Whole lot of revenge games this week in Week 10. Will Fuller, David Johnson's I don't think he's out officially yet, but it looks like he will be out. So Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks and Duke Johnson are probably the only guys I'm looking at for the Texans. I'd rather start Will Fuller over Brandon Cooks, but it seems like they're kind of 1A and 1B at this point. Kareem Hunt and Jarvis Landry are the must-starts for the Browns. Rashard Higgins is an interesting guy. I think he's a sneaky flex option. He had 2 games with a touchdown. Then he caught all 6 of his targets for 110 yards in Week 7. The Texans have one of the worst pass defenses in the league. With no Odell Beckham, you got to figure they've spent the bye week getting Higgins more comfortable in his new starting role as the go-to number 2 wide receiver for the Browns. Harrison Bryant, David Njoku, Austin Hooper. Don't know which one's going to have the big game here. The Texans have allowed the 7th most receiving yards to tight ends. Besides the 7 receiving touchdowns by Kareem Hunt and Odell Beckham combined, the Browns have 9 other receiving touchdowns so far, and 6 of those 9 have gone to tight ends. So these tight ends for the Browns, they're doing the scoring for them. I think one of these guys is going to get in, but like the Packers, I just don't know which one it's going to be. Harrison Bryant has converted all 3 of his red zone targets, so I'm going to guess that he's going to be the best, or he's going to have the best shot at least. But I wouldn't be surprised if either of the other 2 guys score. It seems like Austin Hooper's on track to return for this game, so it wouldn't surprise me if in his first game back he catches 1 ball for 1 touchdown. I can't trust either of the Texans' tight ends. I had Fells to score last week in one of the best matchups for tight ends, and it was Akins that saw more targets. Neither one of them scored. This is a pretty decent matchup, but I'm staying away from both of those Texan tight ends. Buccaneers at Panthers. Christian McCaffrey is doubtful as of right now, but is most likely going to miss this game with, I think it's a shoulder injury now. So for those people that traded for Christian McCaffrey thinking that when he comes back from this injury, he's going to go back to being a number 1 running back, that sucks. I'm sorry that you put yourself in that position, but you might have to wait another week or 2 until you can get him into your lineup. Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski, Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel. There's a whole bunch of guys to start in this game. The one guy that's probably the most that I would be the most leery of is DJ Moore, just because it seems like he seems to always be the first odd man out once these games get going. The one thing that you can look to as a good thing for him is that the Panthers are not going to be able to run the ball here. The Buccaneers have one of the best run defenses in the league, so they're going to have to throw the ball a lot more. I think if DJ Moore can stay relevant, he should be just fine. But we've seen it over the past couple of weeks. Curtis Samuel has kind of overtaken that number 2 spot. But with this team, you just don't know. I mean, all three of them are pretty much guys I think at this point that you have to play. Curtis Samuel, like I said, he's been coming on 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games. 2 of them are rushing. Last week he caught all 9 of his targets for 105 yards, and he scored. He now has 35 touches in the last 4 games. I think Samuel has become at least a flexible play here. He'll have even more value if Christian McCaffrey is to miss this game. Mike Davis only had 1 carry last week, while McCaffrey had 18, plus he had 10 catches. McCaffrey's just ridiculous. I thought Davis would still see at least a third of the carries and hopefully half of the targets, and it just wasn't the case. So again, if McCaffrey plays in this game, which I don't think he will, then I think you have to sit Mike Davis. Like I said, it's a really good run defense in Tampa Bay. The next game is the Chargers at the Dolphins. And wouldn't you know it, we got another player with some
revenge.
Yeah, so Kalen Ballage, who was yet another shining example of how crappy of a coach Adam Gase is. Just another one of these players that was with Adam Gase in Miami that just did absolutely nothing, and then he goes to another team and he looks great. Ballage had a great game last week. He stepped in for Justin Jackson, who left after the first play. Preston Williams is now on IR with a foot injury. Like I said, Justin Jackson is questionable for this game with a knee injury, and then you got Matt Breida, the other running back. He's questionable as well. So this game may be a lot of maybe not unknown names, but a lot of lesser known names. So Keenan Allen is a must start, obviously. Mike Williams, he got hurt on like the second to last play of the game last week, but if he's active, you play him. The Dolphins were just beat for a handful of big plays last week by the Cardinals. Christian Kirk had 2 big bomb of a touchdown passes go his way. Hunter Henry continued his extremely frustrating season last week. 4 straight weeks now with under 35 receiving yards, 5 straight with under 40. Still only 1 touchdown on the year. Donald Parham was the tight end targeted on the game-winning catch, which was eventually overturned. I don't know if there are 12 other tight ends that we can say with enough confidence that are going to be better than Hunter Henry, but I guess I will say that if Mike Williams were to miss this game in case, something crops up with the concussion protocol or whatever, then Hunter Henry is definitely a play, but if not, I think I'm going to have to sit Hunter Henry. Miami is as average of a run defense as there is. I think Josh Kelly has shown he can't handle a full workload. Last week we saw Kalen Ballage. He had 17 total touches and 84 yards. He had a touchdown. Plus, he's got to be pretty pumped because of that revenge factor. If Justin Jackson misses this game, I'm starting Kalen Ballage 100%. Devontae Parker, only 2 games this year without either 64 yards or a touchdown, so he's got a good floor, but he's only really had 1 big game. He's still a start, but he definitely is not a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2 that a lot of us thought he might end up being this year. I think he's really just a low-end number 2, maybe flex play, because he has been consistent, but like I said, you're never going to get he's not going to win you a week. Jordan Howard has had an amazing yards per carry of 1.2 this year, but he scored his 4th touchdown last week. As long as Myles Gaskins is out, I think Howard is a dire need flex play, definitely better in non-PPR leagues. He's got 1 target on the year, so I would not play him in full PPR, even if you are really desperate. Mike Gesicki, fitting that Gesicki and Hunter Henry are playing each other this year. I get to have both of the biggest pain in the asses for me, at least this year in fantasy, playing the same game. As incredibly inconsistent as Gesicki has been, he still has the highest ADOT of all the tight ends that we at least care about, top 15, top 16 tight ends. The Chargers have given up 5 explosive pass plays to tight ends so far this season. So if Gesicki can, if he can connect on one of those deep balls, maybe he can he take it to the house for a touchdown, or just he has that 50 or 60 yard receiving day with one catch for 48 yards or whatever. I think between the two of these tight ends, I'm going to play Mike Gesicki. And God knows I have to make that decision in way too many leagues. The next game we're going to look at here, the Broncos at the Raiders. Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant, Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler. I think Phillip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon are also must-starts. Only the Lions and the Packers have given up more touchdowns this year to running backs than the Raiders, so you definitely want to get both of these Bronco running backs into your lineups, if you ask me. Then you got Josh Jacobs and Darren Waller are the obvious starts for the Raiders. Nelson Aguilar is an interesting guy here. I'm sitting him this week. He had a big 9-target, 107-yard game in Week 7, and I thought it was going to be the beginning of him emerging as a reliable fantasy starter for us. But in the 2 games since, he's only caught 2 of 5 targets. He did have a touchdown last week, had one nice long catch, but the Broncos defense isn't anything to avoid, but it's also not one that, they're not bad, they're not good, they're very average, but I don't know, I'm just expecting more from Aguilar, and it just seems like he's going to continue to just be extremely inconsistent and frustrating, so I'm probably going to end up starting him. It's just, he's not a guy that I want to put too much confidence into. Next, we got the Bills and the Cardinals. So Kenyon Drake is still questionable right now with his ankle injury. Stephon Diggs is a must start in this game, and I think Zach Moss has put himself into that group as well. I think by the end of the season, we're going to be talking about Moss as the back that we want in Buffalo and not Devin Singletary. John Brown looks like he's back. Had 8 catches on 11 targets for exactly 99 yards last week. The Cardinals have done a good job against explosive wide receivers, though, like John Brown, but with a QB that can throw the ball a mile and a half, and with that guy getting 11 targets a game, I don't know how you can sit him. Plus, he's also got an extra little element of
revenge.
I'm sitting Devin Singletary. I'm playing Chase Edmonds as long as Kenyon Drake is dealing with this injury. Hopefully that coaching staff can look at the situation and say we need to give more touches to Chase than to Kenyon. Christian Kirk and DeAndre Hopkins, I think, are both must-starts at this point now. Christian Kirk's just shown he's really starting to come on, and with as good as this offense can be, and as it is, really, I don't think you can sit Christian Kirk now. Larry Fitz is an interesting guy in this game as well. The Bills have not been good against slot receivers, and I don't know if there's a more crafty slot receiver in the league than Larry Fitzgerald. So maybe the Bills look at that, or the Cardinals look at that matchup and they keep Fitz primarily in the slot. That's the thing with this wide receiver core is all 3 of them kind of move in and out of the slot throughout the game, so you can't really pin one of them in there. But I think Larry Fitzgerald may be a good DFS play this week because he's probably going to be dirt cheap. And I definitely think he's worth a flex, at least in PPR leagues. Next, we got the 49ers at the Saints. Raheem Mostert is still on IR. He's unlikely to return. He was not activated today, which is Thursday. Tevin Coleman is still doubtful. I think these 49ers wide receivers are all on track to come back and play, so that's a good thing for them at least. Jordan Reed and Ross Dwelly have good matchups against the Saints. They're in the top 10 as far as fantasy points allowed to tight ends, so if you're hurting at tight end, those are 2 guys you can take a look at. Richie James had a huge game last week with 9 catches for 184 yards and a touchdown. New Orleans has allowed an explosive play to wide receivers at the 4th highest rate in the league. So if either Deebo Samuels or Brandon Ayuk is to miss the game, I think Richie James is a good dart throw this week. He might even be worth a DFS play no matter what, because maybe these wide receivers are at least Debo's coming off of a legit injury, so maybe they keep him on somewhat of a snap count. He played great last week when the 49ers had very little offense, this being Richie James, so I think he's worth a flex. Jerick McKinnon has a touchdown in back-to-back games now, but he was a big letdown last week in a great matchup for pass-catching running backs. He only caught 3 balls for 16 yards. I don't know if I've been more confident in a Thursday night prop bet than I was last week in taking Jerick McKinnon's over 3.5, or I think it was 4.5 receptions, which did not hit. So that was a kick in the nuts for me. But it sounds like Mostert might not be able to return, like I said. So McKinnon looks like he's in line to take over and to get that majority of touches. So he's at least a desperation play here, if not, a pretty decent flex play in standard leagues at least. JaMychal Hasty was a guy that I picked up in 2 leagues because I saw him a couple weeks ago. He looked explosive. I thought, if any of these 49er running backs were to go down again, that Hasty would have a pretty good shot, get some touches, and what do you know? He hasn't done really anything with those opportunities. Didn't really get all that many opportunities. Had one of the best matchups in fantasy football last week, but just 4 carries and 3 rushing yards. Huge disappointment, like I said. This matchup is one of the toughest, so I'm sitting him despite him being really the only other healthy body at running back right now for the 49ers. Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas are obvious starts. I'm going to sit Jared Cook this week. The 49ers have been one of the toughest matchups for tight ends. So with Michael Thomas back, it's going to be tough sledding for Jared Cook. Next, we got the Seahawks at the Rams. Chris Carson is questionable. I'm starting DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I'm starting Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. The Seahawks pass defense is horrible this year. Darrell Henderson is going to be a tough decision for fantasy managers. He seems like he's the guy for the Rams, one of the more well-balanced offenses in the league, but he doesn't have a very easy matchup this week. Their run defense has gotten a lot better over the past few weeks, plus Henderson has been banged up pretty much all season. He's left multiple games with nagging injuries. I'm lucky enough that I don't need him to start for me this week. I have him in 2 leagues. But I understand for those people out there that don't have that luxury, so I can't blame you for starting him. Next, we got the Bengals at the Steelers. Joe Mixon is still questionable. He did not practice today on Thursday, so it looks like Giovanni Bernard is in line to get the majority of touches again. But and he's been great for us filling in the last 2 games. He's had 175 total yards with 8 catches and 3 touchdowns. However, if Mixon is to miss this game, I'm going to sit Giovanni Bernard. I'm sitting him no matter what, really. The Steelers have allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points to running backs this year, so I'm not going to get him in my lineup. Tyler Boyd is a must-start to me with his target share, and I think T. Higgins has become the only other must-start Bengal. He's averaged 7.5 targets a game with 9.5 yards per target, only 3 touchdowns this year so far, but I think as we go through the season, he's going to become more and more involved. They're coming off of the bye, so I think they're going to come out here and maybe they showcase him a little bit, with Tyler Boyd attracting so much attention. A.J. Green, on the other hand, is a must-sit. Yes, he's had double-digit targets in 2 of the last 3 games, but I really think that was just Cincinnati trying to show other teams that he can still catch the ball, trying to see if he's got any trade value. But literally every single receiving stat is down for A.J. Green compared to his career marks. Yards per reception, yards per target. His catch percentage is down. He hasn't scored a touchdown this year, hasn't had a 100-yard game this year. He was 4th in targets among wide receivers for the team last week, or 2 weeks ago. So, he cannot be trusted if you ask me. For the Steelers, it's James Conner, it's Juju, Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, and for me, Eric Ebron. He has one of the best matchups for tight ends. The Bengals have allowed the 2nd most fantasy points to tight ends. They've given up 6 touchdowns in only 8 games to tight ends. Ebron has a touchdown in each of his last 2 games. He is tied with Juju for the team lead in red zone targets, and he's been the most efficient red zone receiver for the Steelers. 7 targets, 5 catches, and he's turned 3 of those 5 catches into touchdowns. So he will definitely be making my touchdown tight end parlay ticket. What do we got for the next game here? We got the Ravens at the Patriots. 2 games left here. Mark Ingram is questionable, limited in practice, but I think limited on Wednesday, but I think he practiced in full on Thursday, which is not good for all these other Ravens running backs. If Mark Ingram is to miss this game again, I'm playing Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. Again, that's only if Ingram is out. If Ingram plays, I don't want anything to do with any of the 3 of them. Mark Andrews, I guess, is still a start here because of what the tight end situation is, but it sucks for him. I have him in 2 leagues, so I feel your pain out there. Marquise Brown is worth a start this week. I know he's frustrating, very up and down season, only 2 touchdowns this year, only 2 games with over 6 targets, and he had 8 and 10 targets in those 2 games, so it's not like he's getting peppered, or he has gotten peppered in any of the games here. But he is 14th in air yards this year so far. Of those 20, of the top 20 in air yards, he has the 3rd highest ADOT. So he's definitely getting the targets deep down the field. And the Patriots have been getting beat by the big play. They have the 6th highest explosive pass rate allowed to wide receivers. Again, explosive passes are 15 yards or more for wide receivers. So I think this is a good week to play Hollywood Brown, whether Stephon Gilmore plays or not, really. And then for the Patriots, you got Jacoby Myers, might be the only Patriot worth playing. He's led the team in targets and yards for the past 3 weeks. It's a really tough matchup. The Ravens have allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, but besides Rex Burkhead, maybe, that's really the only other guy I would consider starting besides Jacoby Myers. And last but not least, we got Monday Night Football here, Vikings at Bears. We're starting Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, and Justin Jefferson. We're starting Allen Robinson. I guess we're starting David Montgomery. The only other guys worth of note, Jimmy Graham is a startable tight end this week. The Vikings have allowed the most explosive plays to tight ends this year, which I found very interesting. He leads the Bears in red zone targets. He's tied for the 3rd most red zone targets in the league right now, that being Jimmy Graham. Plus, the Vikings have allowed, like I said, they're just getting beat up by these deep plays by tight ends. Darrell Mooney is 2nd on the team in air yards, and the Vikings are also tied for the 4th most explosive pass plays allowed to wide receivers. So the Vikings are just getting beaten up by deep plays against wide receivers and tight ends. So I think Darrell Mooney is worth a start here for sure. And I think that's really it. Kind of sucks for Anthony Miller owners out there, which I have him in a dynasty league, so I feel your pain on that as well. But I think that's it for the Bears-Vikings game, and that's it for all of the games. So let me take a hot minute here, and I'll drop in the podcast picks for Week 10. All right, let's take a look at the Week 10 podcast picks. Quick, I'll recap Week 9. It was my first loss of the year as far as my road dog of the week goes. The Broncos failed to cover the 4-point spread at the Atlanta Falcons. I think they lost by like 15 points or something, so I was way off on that one. But it was my first loss of the year, so I'm now 8-1 for the road dog picks of the year, which is still pretty damn good, I must say, for myself. But I did end up going 6-3 on the week, hit on all 3 of my touchdown scores, hit on both the over and the under. So I'm sitting right at 60% after the first 9 weeks. I'm shooting to finish between 62 and 65% for the year, which means I really need to pick it up and have a couple more 6-3 or 7-2 weeks in a row in order to hit that mark. So let's get into Week 10 here. My first pick is going to be the Buccaneers, -5.5, coming off that extremely embarrassing loss to the Saints. The offense looked like complete crap. The defense was put in a lot of horrible positions. I think they bounce back in a big way this week. I think Brady goes out with another full week of practice with all 4 of Gronk and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown. It's just a ridiculous collection of talent they got there. I think they are going to focus a little bit more on running the ball, maybe. The Panthers' run defense is horrible. I'd say if you want to take this game, you might as well just sell yourself off a point, take them at -6.5 instead of -5.5. I mean, how many times do we really see a game end at 5 or 6? I think we see a lot more games end at 7, so you might as well put the hook on your side, and you still only need to win by a touchdown. So I mean, is there really no difference between 5.5 and 6.5? I like the Bucks this week, whichever you end up doing. But if I'm going to take the Bucks, which I think I probably will be, I'm going to be buying it down, or buying it up, I guess you could say, to 6.5. The next one is the Ravens at -6.5. Nice, perfect little line to me. We saw the Patriots just barely escape the Meadowlands last week with a win over the hopeless New York Football Jets. The Ravens are coming off of a big win against the Colts, which is one of the best defenses in the league. I think the Patriots offense in this game ends up looking a lot like they did in Week 6 when they only put up 12 points at home against the Broncos. New England has allowed the 8th most rushing yards per game, and like I said earlier, they've given up big chunk plays to wide receivers, so that is probably the worst situation you can be in with Lamar Jackson and the Ravens coming into town. If you're giving up big plays in the passing game and you're giving up a lot of yards in the running game, you're probably going to get your ass handed to you by the Ravens. So give me Baltimore -6.5. And then the third pick against the spread is going to be the Browns, -3.5. The Texans have allowed the most rushing yards per game, the second most rushing yards per attempt, second most rushing touchdowns. They've also allowed the 7th most receptions to tight ends. And this Browns offense under Kevin Stefanski, they want to run the ball and set up the play action for their tight ends and take their deep shots with the wide receivers. That's what this offense is. The Browns are coming off of the bye here. The combination of Houston's inability to stop the run and seeing as how they apparently can't defend tight ends either. I think this is the match made in heaven for the Browns coming off of their bye. I think this could be a big blowout loss by the Texans. They should be able to put up a decent amount of points themselves, but I think Cleveland wins this game easy, so give me the Browns -3.5. My over for the week is going to be the Broncos at the Raiders, over 50.5. Denver has scored 24.7 points a game over their last 3, and they've allowed 35.5 points per game over those same 3 games. The Raiders have scored 27 points a game, and they've allowed on average 28 points a game, 28.5 really. Throughout the year. So the numbers add up to take the over here. Both of these teams invested their first round pick this year in a wide receiver. Both teams drafted multiple wide receivers. This is the first matchup of them between them this year. It's in Vegas, so if we don't have to worry about the weather, I like that a lot. Derek Carr is quietly having one of his best seasons. He's on pace to tie his career high in touchdown passes with 32, while also on pace to throw his fewest interceptions in his career, only 2 interceptions this year. His yards per game, yards per attempt, yards per completion, his QB rating are all higher than his career marks so far this season. He's got the team at 5-3, so I think the Raiders offense continues to put up 25 plus points in this game. On the other side, I think we're starting to see some chemistry really build between Jerry Jeudy and Drew Lock. Jeudy has double-digit targets in both of his last 2 games. He's only caught 50% of his targets, but he's in the top 5 for air yards in the league, so he's getting the ball deep down the field. He had his second highest amount of receptions last week. The Raiders have allowed an explosive pass play to wide receivers at the 5th highest rate this year, so I will be getting behind this defense at least. I think Jeudy will be getting behind this defense at least once this week, and hopefully he scores. So give me the over in the Raiders-Broncos game. And then my under is going to be the Eagles and the Giants, under 44.5. Both teams are in the bottom 10 in points per game. They just played a few weeks ago, and the game finished under, I think it was 43 total points, so it was right there. Aside from Miles Sanders playing in this game, I think this game ends up looking very similar to the last time that they played. I think this with these two teams knowing each other so well, it will keep the game at a lower score. Both teams are so susceptible to giving up the ball instead of scoring points. Like most weeks, just got to hope that we don't see any defensive touchdowns or any special teams touchdowns. they pretty much are under killers. But yeah, I think I'm going to go with the under in the Eagles-Giants game. These unders keep getting harder and harder to pick, but I think this is the one. My touchdown scorers for Week 10 here. I got James Robinson. He had a really nice game last week with the rookie quarterback making his first start for the Jaguars. Robinson had 25 carries in that game, and I think he has a very similar workload here in this game as long as they can keep it close. The Packers have one of the worst run defenses in the league. We saw what Dalvin Cook was able to do to them. They're giving up the second most fantasy points to running backs so far this season. But more importantly for us in this spot, the Packers have allowed the most touchdowns to running backs. That's rushing and receiving combined. James Robinson has a touchdown in 6 of his 8 games played this year. Give me James Robinson to score. My next is tight end is going to be TJ Hawkinson. The Washington football team has been bad against tight ends for 2 years now. Hawkinson scored last week in a good matchup for tight ends, and with Kenny Golladay missing practice on Wednesday and Thursday, him looking like he's not going to play, I think Hawkinson should have a very good opportunity to score in this game. And then Cooper Kupp is coming off of the bye. The Seahawks have been letting wide receivers go crazy against them. I wanted to get my hands on either Kupp or Robert Woods for one of these 3 touchdown props. And Kupp hasn't scored since week 4, so I'm going to take him as the third guy here. And then let's take a second and check out the road dog of the week.
Oh, you didn't know? Your ass better call somebody.
Got to get back on track here in Week 10. Road dog last week did not hit, but we're going to get back on track here. I'm going to take the Buffalo Bills, getting 2.5 points right now against the Arizona Cardinals in Arizona. I know there's a lot of people out there that say buying points is stupid, but in this spot, to me, I really think it makes sense. On FanDuel Sportsbook right now, it's going to cost you about 45 cents of value to get the Bills at plus 3.5 rather than 2.5. I think there's a really good chance that this game comes down to a last-second field goal. And if you're going to parlay this pick like a lot of people end up doing, there's nothing wrong with doing a little 3-leg parlay on a Sunday morning. I would buy that up and get yourself that extra points. That way, if the Bills find themselves on the losing end of a game-winning field goal, you still end up winning the game or winning your bet with that 3.5 points. If you think the Bills can win outright, then obviously just take the money line and you don't have to worry about it. But the road dogs keep getting harder and harder to pick, and this week it was pretty much them or the Chargers at the Dolphins. But the Chargers they can't finish any games. I was talking to one of my work associates today, my guy Ed, and he's all about the Chargers as a road dog this week. But I'm gonna go with the Buffalo Bills. Maybe we turn this into a shoey bet. I don't know. We'll have to discuss. But that's going to do it for the Week 10 podcast picks. It's going to do it for the Week 10 episode of the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. For more great episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Kickin' or Stickin' is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach.tv, or your favorite podcast service. Kickin' or Stickin' is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gambling operates the National Problem Gambling Helpline Network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Kickin' or Stickin' Fantasy Football Podcast. please remember to play responsibly and always look for your man downfield.